Take it away, Rain.
Maayong gabi, fellow Filipinos! First, before I start, I would like to express my thanks to Vote Filipinas for having me as a speaker in this very important event. So, my name is Rain Baljak, and I am from Cebu. I was born a woman, and depending on where you are in the world, women face gender inequalities. Throughout history, only men carried the right to vote. Has anyone heard of the suffragettes? A suffragette was a member of the notoriously resilient women's activist organization in the early 20th century. They fought for women's rights to vote in public elections. The organization was founded by Emmeline Pankhurst in 1903 and was originally known as the British Women's Social and Political Union. In 1906, a reporter in the Daily Mail coined the term suffragette from the word suffragist to belittle the women advocating women's suffrage. These women embraced their new name and they even adopted it for their newspaper publication. When World War I broke out in 1914, the suffragette campaign was suspended. After the war, the Representation of the People Act 1918 gave the vote to women over the age of 30 who can meet property qualifications. A decade later, women gained electoral equality with men when the Representation of People Equal Franchise Act 1928 gave all women the right to vote at age 21. Now that was in Britain. But here in the Philippines, the women's suffrage movement was one of the first women's rights movements where women grouped together politically. And many Filipino men opposed the idea and held fast to the traditional view that a woman's place was cooking, cleaning, and raising children at home. The men were primarily concerned that the familial dynamic would destabilize if women were to formally step outside their customary role. However, not all Filipino men were opposed to the movement. Congressman Filemon Soto of Cebu filed the first women's suffrage bill at the 1907 Philippine Assembly. And from there on, many suffrage bills were sponsored by a number of prominent men in society across the country. It was not until President Manuel L. Quezon declared his favor towards the suffragette movement in a speech delivered at the Malacanang Palace in Manila on September 30, 1936. Subsequently, President Quezon has having signed the women's suffrage plebiscite bill proclaimed, and I quote, "It is essential and even imperative that the right to vote be granted to Filipino women if they are not to be treated as mere slaves. Their opportunity to wield a very important weapon to defend their right to secure for themselves and those to follow them their well-being and happiness." On September 17, 1937, women's suffrage was legalized in the Philippines, and no one could have anticipated that the requirement would be surpassed because nearly 500,000 Filipino women affirmed their aspiration to vote. The Philippines was one of the first Asian countries to allow women the right to vote and run for office. In Japan, women were finally granted the right to vote in 1947, which is a decade after the Philippines. A lot has changed in 100 years. Like, who would have ever thought that the first Olympic gold medal would be won by a Filipina in weightlifting? I have worked with Hidalyn Diaz, and her strength and courage is an inspiration to us all. Just like Hidalyn and the suffragettes, we must fight long and hard for what we believe in our own way, like a drop of water into the vast ocean, voting is our right to be heard. And when you vote, you are voting for the people who come before you and who come after you. To make this more relatable for the young generation, it is easy to vote online for our favorite artist, beauty queen, and best baby picture. But when it comes to politics, the most important vote, how come we are afraid for our voice to be heard? It is because we are unprepared. Have you ever felt nervous before taking a test? It's because you either did not study or prepare enough. And voting is similar. You must do your homework because it is your sole responsibility to the future of our country to make the right decision. So research your candidate. What did they do? What did they do for the community? What are their plans for the community? What is their professional background and educational attainment? Do they have a clean track record? Listen to their debates and listen actively if they speak from the heart and genuinely want to improve the state of our country. Are they willing to work for it? Beyond the talk, watch how they treat others. Are they empathetic towards the citizens of our nation? You need to be a good judge of character. Do not be bribed by their power. Do not be bought by the public. The elections happen once every 6 years, and 6 years is a long time. Voting is our chance to take an active part in the affairs of the government for the betterment of our nation. Do your research, take notes on your candidates, and let your voice be heard. In the words of Jose Rizal, ang kabataan ang pag-asa ng bayan. In English, the youth is the hope of the country. And as a democratic country, we must stand up for our rights. Please help me and say it in Bisaya. Barugan nato ang atong katungod. My name is Rain Baljak, and remember, vote wisely.